Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. Well, if the past few days are any indication, upcoming trade negotiations with the United States are going to get rocky.
We're not going to make a series of concessions or agree to a series of things that aren't in the interest of the Canadian economy, Canadian businesses, Canadian workers, just to get to a table and have a statement appear on a website in the United States to then receive a whole second list of things that they're going to want.
That's Dominic LeBlanc, the minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, responding to reports that the Trump administration is demanding concessions, described by sources as an entry fee before formally starting CUSMA talks. CUSMA, the Canadian-U.S.-Mexico agreement, first negotiated by Donald Trump during his first term, is up for mandatory review this year. And in Washington yesterday, Trump administration officials expressed frustration with Canada, especially the boycott of American liquor on Canadian store shelves. And Canada's chief negotiator, Janice Charette, had this to say earlier this week.
There is a unity of spirit in Canada to make sure that we get this right. Some of it's going to require that we hold our nerve, right? We could be facing some turbulence. It's not clear that we are going to go back necessarily to the beautiful tariff-free existence we had. We need to hold our nerve. We need to do this together.
Canada, Mexico, and the United States have until the 1st of July to formally renew CUSMA, so the countdown is on. And on Monday, the Prime Minister unveiled a new advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations. We're joined now by two members of that committee. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister in the government of Stephen Harper. Dennis Darby is the president and CEO of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Matt.
Lisa, Janice Charette asked you to join this advisory council. Why did you say yes?
Well, I guess I said yes because, first of all, Janice Charette was asking me to help the country. And I do firmly believe in the importance of everybody pitching in, as you said at the top. And as well, I do think that I can add to what's being advised to the government. And it's a great opportunity to be able to have different kinds of voices feed in to what may become a strategy. I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses on this one, Matt. I may see some things that they don't accept, that they don't think is good advice, but that's okay. At least I'm able to give the advice.
Janice Charette is warning about turbulence, saying we need to hold our nerve. On Sunday, the Prime Minister put out this fireside video in which he says that our ties to America have become our weakness. It feels like we're being prepared for something. What do we have to hold our nerve against, do you think?
Uncertainty.
That's a good one.
Lisa, go ahead first.
I was going to say uncertainty, to be honest. I mean, you really wake up. Do you not wake up every morning, Matt, and wonder what it is that President Trump has said about us over evening?
I peer at my phone with squinty eyes early in the morning.
It's really true. So uncertainty, I think it's proper for Janice to signal to the rest of Canada that, hey, we understand that. We get that as well. There's a lot of uncertainty here. We don't quite know what may be coming at us. So don't assume it's going to be all wonderful.
Dennis, have you signed up? Dennis, have you signed up for a fight?
Well, I hope it's not. I hope it's not a fight, but we better be prepared to stand our ground when it comes to our sector for manufacturers. You know, it's more than an esoteric discussion about nationalism or ego. It's really business, because already in the last year, manufacturing exports to the U.S. are down about 24%. That's our biggest customer. But it's also true in the U.S. that their manufacturing sector is suffering as well. So I think there's an opportunity for a solution, but as Lisa said, it's not going to be easy.
I want to get to the specifics of your sector in a moment, Dennis, but is your sense that the Prime Minister and Janice Charette and others are preparing Canadians for hard times? Like, what are we as a nation looking forward to?
Well, I think the one thing that is probably going to be true is, the free trade, as we call it, and really CUSMA is not actually free trade, but the free trade agreement we've had with the U.S. for almost 40 years, and they consider the first trade agreement, it will probably not be free. I think there's going to be a price. I think the U.S. administration says there is a price for entry to sell to our market. They've said it to every country in the world. We need to be prepared that the way it was is not the way it will be going forward, which means got to be more competitive. Costs are going to be higher. I don't think it's going to go back to the way it was back even 2018 when Mr. Trump signed this deal.
These negotiations haven't even started, and already it feels tense. Yesterday at a U.S. congressional hearing, the American Trade Representative, Jameson Greer, said the United States might have to take action over Canada's boycott of American liquor. Several Canadian provinces, as you know, pulled U.S.-made alcohol from stores last year. Have a listen to this.
I think we're kind of at the end of our rope in just asking for them to do this. And think about it this way. There are two countries that have retaliated economically against the United States in the past year, the People's Republic of China and Canada. So that's kind of the company that they're running in. So my sense is there may have to be an enforcement action to deal with this issue on wine and spirits in Canada. An
enforcement action. Lisa, the Prime Minister said yesterday that the United States does not dictate the terms of negotiations. But how would you advise Mark Carney to respond to what I think a lot of people hear there as a threat?
Yeah, I agree with what the Prime Minister said. First of all, and regardless of being on an advisory council, I would have agreed with what the Prime Minister said regarding negotiations. I do want to point out one thing. It's not like we haven't been preparing for these negotiations for a long, long time. Both sides have. It's not a situation where we're suddenly firing it all up. There have been lots of, I would say, consultations on both sides of the border about the importance of CUSMA, because this is the process you're supposed to go into as you approach this renewal date of July 1. I think what you're hearing from Janice and the Prime Minister are recognition that some of these tariffs, the Section 232 tariffs, for example, Dennis knows them quite well, probably better than I do, the implication and the impact it has on the economy. But those things are going to have to somehow be negotiated away. Perhaps this is going to be under whatever umbrella of CUSMA there is, and that's what everybody's getting ready for.
But it sounds like the Americans are asking for concessions before we even start with the negotiations, that there's this entry fee that we won't even meet you at the table unless you deal with some of these irritants.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think in the past, that is something that Canada has done. You can point to last summer when, on good faith, the Prime Minister reversed some legislation that was annoying for the United States.
And what did we get for that?
Indeed. I don't know if we're there anymore. That's the point. So he can say that we're not going back to the negotiation table. The July 1 date of CUSMA is not magical. It is written in stone. It's written in legislation, but both sides have indicated that you can extend past it. So I don't know whether or not we have this actual hard date that we have to adhere to. But as well, you have to have the discussions and the consultations along the way. U.S. is going to say what they're going to say in the press, Matt, quite frankly. We have to focus on what we can do and putting together the best possible deal for Canadians.
Dennis, are you worried that we as a nation may not even get to the table unless we make certain concessions to the United States? This entry fee as it's being discussed?
Well, I'm not a negotiator, but I think that's, a lot of this rhetoric going on is to obviously trying to soften the way for that negotiation. But I think there will be those discussions. We know, talking to business leaders in the U.S., that everybody has the same objective, is to try to find a way to retain CUSMA, to retain this agreement that is good for business. So that's kind of our focus. But I understand, in the press, it's pretty clear that the U.S. floats an awful lot of ideas. But I agree with Lisa. We've just got to hold our nerve and get to the table and restart those discussions, which have been going on, to be fair, between officials, but we really need to get to the table to have some kind of a framework, because you can't negotiate your way in the press. Because the stakes are high, right? How important is CUSMA for people in manufacturing in this country? Well, it's business. It's essential. It's really what gives Canada's manufacturing sector, the 1.8 million people that work in it, scale to be able to be competitive. When you think about it, we have a very small domestic market. Most of what we produce in places like Ontario, 80% of our exports are manufactured goods. And that's why those sectoral tariffs that Lisa referred to are so difficult, because you're applying tariffs on things made of iron and steel and aluminum and wood. These are the things that we make in central Canada, make all across the country. And those really have an impact of, first of all, lowering the trade we have with the U.S. down about 23% in the last year, but more importantly, adding costs both to Canadian and U.S. manufacturing. It's maybe not necessarily something the U.S. administration talks about, but their own sector has seen a drop in investment. They've seen a drop in employment. Manufacturing has not suddenly come back to the U.S. adding tariffs has added costs to everybody on both sides of the border. And so it is so important, and for Canada in particular, because our biggest customer, because we're right next to them, it's hard for us to look elsewhere. Other sectors might. Other sectors, we think we should sell more oil and gas, sell more commodities. But for manufacturing, it's very difficult to pivot away from a market so close to you and so similar to you. And so we really have to find a way to continue to have access to that market.
Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, spoke earlier this week and was very critical of Mark Carney's approach toward the United States. Take a listen to this.
We're a year into this. He was elected on the single promise that he would negotiate a win with the U.S. And since that time, he's been losing. Double the tariffs on steel and aluminum, triple the tariffs on lumber, broadening of tariffs out to other products that weren't formerly covered. And he's done nothing to stop it other than to wave the white flag.
Lisa, do you agree with Pierre Poilievre that Mark Carney has waved the white flag in the face of the United States?
I think the leader of the opposition is doing exactly what he needs to do. He needs to put up the opposition to what it is happening right now. He's giving a voice to people who are concerned about the length of time it's taking. Every minute of the day goes by when we don't have certainty, it's bad for investment in the country. And I think that's very valid for Pierre Poilievre to come up with as well. And of course, he's also raising the flag in terms of wondering and worrying whether or not we're going to make too many concessions. And I think that's valid as well, Matt.
What would you like to see Mark Carney and his government do differently then?
Well, right now, I don't think right now what they're doing, which is holding the line till we can have comprehensive negotiations and not giving away even more, is probably the right thing to do at this point. I know we can read about what's going on between the U.S. and Mexico, or what the U.S. administration says, but this is really important to Canada's economy, extremely important for Canadians, and I think the right thing to do is to hold out till you get to the negotiating table.
Lisa, what about for you? And this isn't a partisan question. No. It's about, is there something that the Prime Minister and his team could be doing differently? If the criticism is that you were elected, you were hired to deal with this issue, and the issue is still perhaps, it's burning even brighter now. So is there something different that the Prime Minister could be doing?
So the part that I was concerned about prior to, I would say last week, Matt, was whether or not the government was telling Canadians enough about what was really going on. And I'm going back to what you said at the beginning, the question you posed, which is the most pertinent question, I think, for Canadians today is what's coming next? What's going to happen? How am I going to be in a lot of pain personally, economically? What can I expect? And I think the government has to be transparent about what the impacts are going to be on Canadians. And I think the Prime Minister, either by announcing this advisory council or by having his video on the weekend, is taking steps to give Canadians assurances that they understand what's going on and that we're going to keep you posted. So transparency is always going to be really important. Let us know where we are in terms of the negotiations. Don't let the Americans, through their media channels, actually set the framework or the narrative as to what's happening.
What about the arguments that people want the Prime Minister to throw a punch? You mentioned a couple of those concessions that Canada made last year, which got digital services tax and what have you. We got nothing back in some ways for that. And there are politicians, including the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, who have been calling for some time for retaliatory tariffs. Take it to them. Is there an argument to do that now?
I don't think so. Not at this point, Matt. I mean, we're very close to when the review is supposed to happen. There already are discussions going on. I don't think, again, I'm not a negotiator, but I don't know whether you'd want to be throwing a punch in the public arena right now. I think we need to go in and show the data which says, this agreement works for the U.S., it works for Canada, it works for workers in both countries, and we need to find a way to get to some level of predictability, because I think, again, that's not my bailiwick, but I tell you, from a point of view of manufacturers, they want to see some certainty. And I think Lisa said it earlier, and I think the Prime Minister's right to say, things are hard. We know they're hard in our sector, but I think we need to be really buttoned down on this.
Lisa?
Yeah, I agree. It's when you say people want the Prime Minister to throw a punch, I have to tell you, Matt, that my experience in dealing with people that I deal with in my new business or my business line, they're not saying that at all. The people who actually have economic ties to the United States are saying, we want a solution to all of this. They're not saying that we want you to go out and push the Americans around. I do think it's important, though, to remember we have a deal with CUSMA. I know the Prime Minister says this all the time, so does Minister LeBlanc, and it's actually quite true. We have a deal. It goes to 2036, and the Americans would have to do something very radical in order to bring that to an end.
That's an important point to stress. The 1st of July is the point of renegotiation, but if that's not reviewed, the deal still exists, right?
The deal still exists.
With annual reviews, yeah. With annual reviews. With annual reviews as well, yeah.
Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, very good point, Dennis, yeah.
And so
we have a deal.
Yeah. Where does that leave us then?
Where it leaves us is those sectoral tariffs that are really harmful to the economy. And those are the things that the government really does have to turn its attention to because they're the ones having the impact. CUSMA is just, I would say, a vehicle through which we're going to attempt to get those sectoral tariffs removed.
That's absolutely correct, Matt. I mean, think about it. Our trade with the U.S. is down about 24% on about 10% of what we sell. Almost 80 to 85% is going tariff-free right now. It's that 10 or 15% that are hit by the sectoral tariffs that are really causing the slowdown in our sector and the slowdown in the economy.
Dennis, do you worry? We were down in Mexico City earlier this year, and I know the Prime Minister and his teams have been down there as well. And that Mexico is working to figure out a new deal with the United States, and Canadians have been trying to build ties with Mexico. But do you worry that there's the possibility that Mexico could negotiate its own deal with the United States and leave Canada on the side of the road?
Well, there's no indication from talking to our sector that is how they're approaching it. But yes, Mexico has different issues with the U.S. than Canada. The U.S. has different concerns with them. I don't think so. And yes, we were part of that trade negotiation or that trade mission. And there's lots of ties between Canada and Mexico, which actually we haven't taken advantage of. So no matter what happens, if CUSMA continues, we have a trade agreement with Mexico, and in fact, we actually don't take advantage of it. So I'd look at it the other way and say we have a great opportunity to trade with Mexico. If the U.S. continues to make it difficult, are there other avenues for us, especially in our sector?
We just have a couple of minutes left. What would you consider, Dennis, to be success for Canada at the end of these negotiations?
Well, as Lisa said, the one thing that the business wants is some certainty. So I know it may not be the most exciting headline, but some certainty about that trade relationship, what the rules will be, is there going to be some level of tariff? Is there going to be some level of quotas in one area or another? Because right now that is causing companies to sit on their hands and not make investments in technology and equipment, not increase their productivity because everybody is uncertain. So getting to some predictable future. The current situation with those very, very high sectoral tariffs are not sustainable for Canada. I don't think they're sustainable for the U.S. either. That predictability is really important, so certainty would be great.
Lisa, predictable is not a word that people often apply to Donald Trump, but what would you consider success coming out of these negotiations for this country?
Right. Success for me coming out would be the fact that, first of all, as a country, we've diversified our economy, which I think is really important. And I say that because the second part is that we have a strong, positive relationship with the United States, and we continue to do great amounts of trade with them. That's the outcome for me. I think the relationship cannot be thrown in a wastebasket whatsoever. We have too much at stake and too many companies who do 80% of their business in the U.S. and 20% here in Canada, but are domiciled here in Canada. We can't leave those people out of the loop.
And so for Canadians, Lisa, just the final word to us broadly, if we're not in those industries, but we're worried about the economy, we're worried about that rocky road that we were talking about earlier. How bumpy do you think this is going to be?
I worry about it, Matt. I'm going to tell you, I do worry about it. And I worry about it because it's just a confluence of so many external factors all happening at the same time, courtesy of the U.S. administration. But Canada can get rocked by those waves that are happening in other parts of the world. I don't quite know how we're going to get rocked this time, but we're resilient, we'll be prepared, and we're going to try to work as hard as we can to give the best advice to the government.
It's good to speak with you both about this. We'll check in again as we get closer to the 1st of July. In the meantime, thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister, and Denis Darby is the president and CEO of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. You've been listening to the Current podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.